everyone, and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Alexia, and I am the Program Manager of the Microsoft Reactor Toronto. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I'd like to quickly review two items: our Code of Conduct and event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our Code of Conduct. Microsoft seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. The session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. I will be sharing the link in the chat for our channel. And secondly, if you have not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please note that you must create an account on YouTube in order to have access and interact in the chat. You can set that up now. And if you're unable to use the chat but have questions, feel free to reach out to us through social media or on our website. Which brings us to today's session. I'm going to bring in our two speakers here for today, Julia and Mark. Hi, both. How's it going?
Hey, Alexia.
We're so excited to have you here today for this session. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. This is the first Reactor session I'm joining this year, so I'm excited for what we are going to learn today.
That's true. Yeah, it is the first one of the year. Well, on to a great one. And yeah, take it away.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I'm joining in from Nairobi, Kenya. So it's 7 p.m. here. I'm excited to have this as how I close the day. So speaking of which, I would really love to probably know where you're all joining us from. So on the chat, if you can, please just do a short introduction. Just let us know who you are and where you're joining from. Would be really happy to just have an understanding of where you guys are joining us from. So today we're going to have a really interesting session, and I have with me one of the amazing student leaders that we have in our communities. So I won't say much about him, but Mark, I'll allow you to introduce yourself. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do as everyone else introduces themselves on the chat.
Hello, everyone who is tuning in live, either morning, afternoon, or evening. I'm super thrilled to see you here. So I'm Mark Gatere. I'm a student ambassador, Microsoft Learn student ambassador at Dedan Kimathi University of Technology. I am a community advocate. I like working with communities. I like helping students get started into tech and also make them have a clear path into tech. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Yeah, really nice knowing you. I've known you for a couple of months, maybe even a year now. And yeah, I'm really fascinated by the work that you do. And all the projects that I actually picked up from you was Gaterebot. And I think that's actually the session that inspired us to have this presentation today. So I don't know if you can just speak to us more about Gaterebot. If you have it, probably you can also show us so that we can now have an understanding of this Chat GPT clone that you actually developed. Since that is what this session will focus on, will ideally be building one from scratch. And so it would be nice to just understand the background of that project and kind of just a sneak peek of what that project kind of looks like.
Wow, sure. So Gaterebot is a Chat GPT clone, and it's built using NextJS and some framework like Tailwind, but its core technology is leveraging the OpenAI API to bring that conversational feel as you normally interact with Chat GPT. That's the same case with Gaterebot. So it brings out that NLP feel as you're interacting with a bot. So yeah, that's basically what Gaterebot is. It's a chatbot. So I don't know whether I'm gonna show you here live, as you've said.
Yeah, you can actually share your screen. We've also dropped a link to the live version of Gaterebot. So I believe our viewers can also just look at it, sign in, and try it out. So as we also proceed with this session, so feel free to drop your questions. I'll be monitoring the chat. And if you have any questions, just drop them and we'll be able to address them as we continue. So Mark, you can now show us a little bit about Gaterebot.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully my screen is visible.
Yep.
Awesome. So this is the first page. Once you get into Gaterebot, I believe the link has been shared by Julia, as she has said. So this is the authentication page. Once I authenticate, I want to get into Gaterebot, sign in. Once I sign in, I can select one account to sign in with. So this is the first page that I get once I get into Gaterebot. So there's just the greeting, hello, Mark Gatere, and then welcome to Gaterebot. Then I can continue to chat. So as you can see, the UI is like Chat GPT. So if I'm to just give a prompt, hello, and who are you? As you can see, we are receiving a response and it's telling me, hello, I'm Gaterebot, a super smart and friendly AI created by Gateremark. How can I assist you today? I can give a second prompt. What do you do? So as you can see, I'm an AI designed to provide helpful and accurate information, assist and with tasks, and engage in a friendly conversation. So that's basically what we'll be building in the course of this session. I believe everyone has a feel of the project that we'll be building, and I believe everyone is excited to build such a project. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm honestly excited, and I think we don't even need to waste any more time. Let's get right into it. So walk us through, where do you get started in building such a project? What are the requirements that we need? And as I said, if you have any questions as we continue, drop them on the chat and we'll be able to address them. So Mark, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julia. So we'll first start with the slides so that we can have a sneak peek on what we're gonna be building, and also how know the requirements that one needs as he's building such a project. So the first slide is on prerequisites. So knowledge in JavaScript comes in handy as we'll be using Next.js, which is a framework built on top of React. And we all know that React.js is it's a JavaScript library. So some knowledge in React.js can come in handy since we'll be using Next.js, which is a framework built on top of React.js. And also some knowledge in Tailwind CSS, that will be our styling framework. About the requirements, we only need Visual Studio Code as our text editor, or you can use any other different ID, but I prefer Visual Studio Code. And then we should have Node installed in our computer because we'll be using the Node package manager. So these are the steps that we'll be using to create up our project. So first we'll start by creating a Next.js app. Then we'll get the OpenAI API key. The other thing we'll do is create an API endpoint. Then we'll wire up the UI or create the UI where the user can interact with our bot. The second thing is that we'll send chats to MongoDB using the Mongo ORM object relational model. So in that step, that is in step 2, we will get the MongoDB API key. Then we will create a Mongo model /schema. Then we'll also create an API route to send and fetch chats. Then we'll link up on our front end. So I believe that those are the steps that we're gonna be using. And let's now dive into the code. So the first step we've said is creating a Next.js app. So I will open my terminal. And to create a Next.js app, we have to have Node installed because we'll be using the Node package manager. If you go to the Next.js documentation, you'll see that to create a new Next.js app, you'll use a command known as npm create next app. But for this case, we'll be using pnpx, and I will explain why in a few. npx create next app. So we are creating our first Next.js application. So what is your project name? I can call it Chat AI. I will not be using TypeScript since a number of you might not be conversant with TypeScript. So I'll just select no, then leave everything else as default. I'll be using Tailwind CSS. I'll be using the app router. And now our app is being created. So as our app is being created, allow me to explain why you should use PNPX instead of NPM. I can go to one slide and to one tab and why you should use PNPM over NPM. So PNPM is a faster and more efficient package manager than NPM. So that's the main reason why I'm using PNPM. So when I use PNPX, it's always related to PNPM. When I use NPX, it's always related to NPM. So as you can see, it's built on top of NPM. So it's a replacement for it, and because it's efficient and it's faster. So let's go back to our app and see whether it's done. Wow, it's already done. And what did it do? As you can see here, it has not downloaded any dependency, but it has fetched the existing dependencies from the virtual store. So basically, that's why it's faster. So I can then change directory to Chat AI, then open that in VS Code. So here is our NextJS app, and we are done with the first thing that we need to do in this project. So I can open my terminal and then run enpm run dev. I want to run my project in the development server. So I can head over to localhost 3000. Just 1 second and it will be ready. As it loads, let's see our next step in our slides. So we have already created a Next.js app. We are waiting for it to load because we are loading it currently in the development server. So the next step will be get OpenAI API key. Hopefully it's done. Yeah, here is the template that of our Next.js app. So we've seen the next thing that we will be doing is getting the OpenAI API key. So I will head over to the OpenAI documentation because that's where you normally go to get the API key. Then on the sidebar, I have this section known as API keys. So head over to API keys. And then I want to create a new secret key. This is basically the only step that you need to do when you are getting the API key. Head over to the OpenAI documentation. On the sidebar, you'll see, after logging in, you'll see a place where it's the section that is written API keys. Then you can create a new secret key. I can just give it any name, Chat AI, create secret key. So this is the API key. I will copy it and then come back to my project. So in my project, I will create a .env.local file. This is the file where we store all the environment variables, since these environment variables are not pushed to the public. So I will create a .env file, .local file. Then I will create I will name my API key OpenAI API key. Then I will paste my API key and we are done with the other step. So if I may go back to my slides, we have already gotten the OpenAI API key. So the other thing that we will do is create now the API endpoint or the root handler that will help us interact now with the OpenAI API. So I will head over to the Vercel AI documentation. So when I want to create this handler, Vercel, the creators of Next.js, they have come up with this AI SDK that is an utility or a library that is helping us to build conversational AIs or conversational bots using TypeScript and JavaScript. So in case you're building with Vercel, or with Next.js, it's the best thing that you can do instead of trying to find all other libraries to come up with a conversational bot or a chat bot. I advocate for the Vercel AI SDK. So we'll head over to getting started. So here you can see the first step is building your app, which we've already done. We have the prerequisites, which is Node.js installed. We have Node.js with us. We also have the OpenAI API key. So creating the application, we have already created a Next.js application. So the other thing that we will do is now install these dependencies. These dependencies will help us work with the SDK. So I'll open a new terminal and paste the command. I've just copied that command and pasted it here. So it's installing the AI and the OpenAI SDK. As they both install, because of time, I will head back to the documentation and see how we can now configure everything. So as you can see, they are saying that to configure the OpenAI API key, create a .env.local file. We have already done that. Then paste the OpenAI API key. We have also done that. Then the other thing, as we have said, is creating an API root handler or an API endpoint. So here, I'll copy this code and then explain it bit by bit, so that because of time, I will not write the entire code one after the other. So I'll just copy this code. As you can see, we are being told that in the app directory, we create another directory known as API. And in the API directory, we create another directory known as chat, then paste this code in a root.ts file inside the chat directory. But because we are using JavaScript, I will use root.js file. Let's see what I have just said. Let's just do that. So I will head over to chat. So in chat, I will create a new folder or a directory and call it API. Inside API, I will create another folder and call it chat. And inside chat, I will create now the root file, which is root.js. Since we are using JavaScript, then paste that code here. So there's only one thing that I will do even before I start explaining this code. We have something that we call type annotation, which is in TypeScript. But because we are using JavaScript, I will edit this request and remove this type annotation because we are not using TypeScript. And that is the only thing that I will edit in this code block. So we already have our root handler with us. Let me explain now this code. So the first thing that we are doing is importing the dependencies. Remember, we have already installed OpenAI. As you can see on my terminal, we have installed it, and we have installed the AI dependency, which is also here. So the first thing that we are doing in this root handler is importing the dependencies. Then the other thing that we are doing is creating an instance or the OpenAI client so that we can now interact with the API. As you recall, we have already gotten our API key and named it OpenAI API key. So here what we are doing basically is now getting the API key from the environment variables. The other thing is setting up the runtime to edge. This is for the best performance. I will not get into edge functions or what serverless functions work, but you can research on how cloud functions work or the functions that run in the cloud, how they work. That will now lead you to edge functions and also serverless functions. But for this case, this is for the best performance of our application. Then here we have an asynchronous function, which is a post function. The first thing that we are doing is that we are receiving requests, and we'll see what request is. You might not have understand how this code flows until we wire up everything. So it's receiving request as the parameters, and then from that parameter we are getting the messages. If I'm to explain what messages are, so messages are the prompt. When we are using the application, when we give a prompt to the chatbot, that is now what is received in the messages right from the front end. So that is what messages we get, the messages. Then we have this response where we now pass the messages into our model. So in this response, we have this entire function. This function is now the function that works on giving now the prompt to the model. So the first thing that we are doing is defining the model. As you can see, we are using GPT 3.5 Turbo. Then we are setting stream to true. I will be explaining stream in a few. So do not worry about what stream is. I will explain it in a few. Then we are passing now the messages that we are receiving from the request body or from the user into the model, or we are giving the messages into the model so that we can get a response. Then here now we are receiving the stream, the response of the stream. And now let me explain what stream is so that we can understand these other two lines of code. Let me go back to my slides. So if I'm to go to the next slide, I want now to explain stream. Assuming that you have a water tank at one end of the field, assuming you have a big field, you have a water tank at one end, and then you have a swimming pool or a pool on the other end of the field. And you are told to transport the water from the water tank to the swimming pool or to the pool so that people or the users can start swimming. So you can decide to first take the water tank and carry the entire water tank to the pool. Then after you drain the water, people to start swimming. Or you can decide to create a stream or a canal. So this means that when you create a stream, the water will flow from the water tank into the swimming pool. And the advantage of that is that people can start even swimming before the entire water tank has been drained. Okay, so the stream comes in handy in that we start receiving the water from the water tank. Even before the entire water has been drained, we can start swimming. So assuming now you had about 3 water tanks, if you are to transport one after the other, it could have taken time. But the good thing is that when you have a stream, the water will just flow. The users will continue swimming, or people will continue swimming as the water is being drained from the water tank. So assuming that this water tank is our data or the response that we are getting from the model. So if we are to get the entire response then given to the user, I don't know whether I first I say that is the user. So when I say the user, that is the user. So assuming that now we are getting the response from the model. So assuming that you are the user who is using a chatbot, if you wait for the entire response, like asking Chat GPT, who are you and what do you do? That is a huge prompt, which possibly ChatGPT has to respond a lot of things and tell you, I do this and this, I can generate code, I can give insights on agriculture, I can do all this. So if I'm to get the entire response from the chatbot at a go, I will first wait for the response to be prepared, then I'm given the response. And that might take time, and that is what we call blocking components or blocking elements. It might take time, and it's not good for user experience. But assuming that ChatGPT is responding one after the other word, that is, after the response is ready, it's just given to the user. After it is ready, it is just given to the user. After it is ready, it is just given to the user. As we will see how that will come in action. So basically, I believe streaming will come in handy. We will understand streaming once we get to now work with our chatbot. But I believe you've seen when you ask ChatGPT a question, it doesn't respond with an entire paragraph, but it gives word after the other. This means that after the response is ready, after a specific section or a chunk is ready, it is given to the user. So that is basically how streaming works. So if I'm to go back to my code, that is how streaming works. And now we have this response that is given to the user as streams. So if I'm to go back to the slides, we already have created the API endpoint. Let's now wire up the UI or create where the user can interact with the model or can interact with the API, because the user will not interact with the API root handler. So if I are to go back to my documentation, now we are here at wiring up the UI. So one thing is that I'll also copy this block of code because of time. And then as you can see, we are told that in the app, we have the page.tsx file, but for our case, we have the page.js file. This is the main file that we are working with. So in our app, go to the page.js file and paste this block of code. So these are page.js. I will select everything and then delete and paste now what we have been given in the documentation. So now if I'm to, before I explain the code, let us see how our front end is, or let us see where the user can, how the user can interact with our project, because we have edited the page.js file. So as you can see, this is our page.js file, or the front end. So because you can see the lines, the gradients, because of the CSS. So allow me to edit the global.css and delete all these styles to avoid getting those gradients, but leave the Tailwind base and the components and the utilities there because we are using Tailwind. Then go back to the page. So as you can see, we have no more gradients. And if you look at the bottom, we have this input section. Let us just give it a shot, or let us just try to see whether possibly our app is working. Let me just say hello there. Closing my fingers. Wow, you can see it's working. If I'm to ask, who are you? So our app is already working. Let us now go back to the code and explain what we have done. So the first thing that we are doing here is importing this hook from AI/React. We've seen that in the SDK, it's providing an easier way to work with the APIs. So once we import this hook, we have this default function, which is the chat function. And inside this function, we can see we are using the use chat hook. And in the use chat hook, we have different sections. We have the messages, we have the input, we have handle input change, and handle submit. So you can see we have different functions in the hook. So if I'm to go back to the documentation, the good thing is that when you are working with these things or working with any technology, it's using the documentation. And scroll down to the provider section, we have OpenAI. So everything here is basically everything that we have done. So the getting started example in this documentation is basically now they are using NextJS. So everything that is here is everything that we have done. We have created a root handler. We have connected with the UI, but I wanted now to get to this section where we are saying you are using the use chat hook. So use chat has a lot. If I'm to click the use chat, it has a lot. It has chat helpers. It has chat options. So I will not get into the depths of what these are, but you can go to the documentation to review that. So I'll just get to the helper so that I can explain how messages work and also the input. So basically, the messages, as you can see, these are chat helpers. The messages, this one, is the response that we are getting from the model. Remember that we are streaming our response from the API root handler. So that once we get that streamed response, it's now passed into this messages state, because it's a state. Then we are receiving the response, that is the messages on our end. So basically that's what messages is. It's the response that we are receiving from the backend or from the API. Then the input is basically what we pass into our form or into our input section. As you can see, this input is being called here. That is the value that we pass into the input function. That is the one that is passed into input. Then we have handle input change. That is also on change in our input section or in our input element. Then we have handle submit. So on submit, we call this handle submit function. Then because we receive the messages, we map them, and in each message, because the messages is an object, we receive an object from the API. So we map them, and in each message, I think I can console log. Let me console log messages. So if I'm to log the messages and go back to my project, then inspect. So initially, it's the array has nothing. Then let me say hello. As you can see, we are getting an array of awesome. So we have hello, which is the role of the user, that is me. Then we have the role of the assistant that is giving back content, that is, hello, how can I help you today? That is basically what now we are receiving as the messages. Because it's coming as an array, that's why we are mapping and only getting the user. If the user is if the role is user, we display user. If the role is assistant, if the role that is, if it's not user, we display AI. Then we get the content from both. That's basically what we have here. So I have a good GitHub repository with all this code and all these steps which you can go through. So we have already done the first step, which is creating the Chat GPT or the chatbot. So as you can see, we can ask any prompt, we can give any prompt, and it can give us a response. So we are now to the next step. We have already created the front end that is wiring up the UI. Now we are to send the charts to MongoDB using the Mongoose ORM. So the first thing, as you can see, is get the MongoDB API key or the connection string so that you can connect with our MongoDB database. So I will head over to MongoDB. So if I go to MongoDB, if you go to MongoDB, possibly you might be new to MongoDB, so you'll have to create an account. And once you have an account, the first thing is having an organization. It will ask you about creating an organization. Then you'll come to this section where you create the project. So if I come here, I already have some projects that are running. So you'll come and just click here, new project. It's just 2 steps where you create new project, then give the project a user or the manager or the project manager. You'll just select everything. It will be by default. Then it will lead you to this page. Okay, so I will not create a new project. I had created this one known as Next Chat AI because of time, so that we can get now to work with our database. So you'll just come here and create a new project. Then it will give you this UI. So as you can see, we already have our next Chat AI project. So the first thing I will do is head over to database. So in my database section, I have no database. So I'll build a database. So the first thing that you can see here is different ways on how you can deploy your database. So we're gonna go with the free tier. The name of the cluster is basically the one that holds all different databases that you have in your project. Since we have no cluster here, we'll just give it the default cluster 0. Then I'm gonna use Azure as my cloud provider. Then click create deployment. Awesome. So this is the first thing that you'll see, is that you now how to connect now to your cluster. So as you can see, the first thing is create a database user. I will leave it as it is by default, the username and the password. So the second step is choose a connection method. So I'll click choose a connection method. I'll go with drivers because I'm using Node.js. So as you come here, you'll see we have now our connections tree, or the API key that we say that we will get from the MongoDB. So I will copy this connection string, head over to my .env file, and now create a variable known as MongoDB URI is equals to, and paste it there. So as you can see, there is our username and the password of that is for our database. So we already have the MongoDB API key or the connection string. So I can just complete everything and say review steps, and then just say done. So I already have my database with me, and I've already copied the API key or the connection string. The other step will be create a Mongoose model and schema. So what a model is and what a schema is, I think it will be better if I explain as we are doing it. So I will hand back to my project. I was to install MongoDB, but now I'll be installing Mongoose. Since we are using Mongoose as our ORM, it gives that an easier way on how to create the schema, which we can connect with our database. So I will install first Mongoose. So as it is installing, remember we are in this step where we are creating a Mongoose schema and a model. So now back to my project. It is installed. Mongoose has been installed. I will go to my app directory, then create a new directory known as models. That is where our schema and our model will be. So in this model, I will create a new file known as chat.js. And in this chat.js, this is where we'll be creating our model. So the first thing I will do is import Mongoose from Mongoose. So we already have installed Mongoose. The second thing is now connecting to the database. So I'll say Mongoose dot connect. Connect process dot env dot MongoDB. This is how we named our connection string. So we can say if it's not available, just log MongoDB URL, MongoDB URI is not available. So we have already connected now to our database. This is how the easiest way on how you can work with MongoDB database by using Mongoose. So the other thing is just say Mongoose dot promise. This is to handle the promises. That is the asynchronous operations is equals to the global promise. Then the other thing now is creating the schema. So this now we are defining how we want our documents to look like, or the files that we want to store in our MongoDB database. So I'll say const. I'll call my schema chart schema is equals to new Mongoose schema. So the first thing that I will do in the Mongoose schema is say I want email. I want to store an email, which will be a string. Then I want to store the messages. The messages are the ones that we are receiving. So messages. As you've seen, it's an object. We just call an object. Then I'll close that. I also want to add another thing, which is timestamps, and make them true. That is, it will store even the timestamps as we are sending the data to the database. I believe that's all we need for our schema. So our schema is ready. Then the other thing is now creating the model. So we'll just say const chat is equals to Mongoose. Yeah, I'm glad ChatGPT is completing. I mean, the GitHub Copilot is completing the code for me. So what this line does, let me explain, is that it first checks whether we have a model that is existing that is known as chat. In case there is no such a model, it creates another chat model based on our schema. So what a model is, it's just like the connections that the collections that we have in MongoDB. Then the schema is what will be stored in the documents. So we already have our model and the schema. So the other thing that we will do, if I'm to go back to the slides, we have the model and the schema, creating now the route to send and fetch charts. The charts that now we are displaying, we want to send them to MongoDB. So I will go back to my project. In the app directory, inside the chat directory, I will create a new folder or a new directory known as send charts. That is the first one, send charts. So in this send charts, I will create a new file, which is the root.js file. And here it's where we're going to define the API endpoint for sending our charts to MongoDB. So the first thing is import chat from in the model here. So after importing chat, I will also import next response, since we want to see our response that is from the server. So we've imported chat, that is the schema and the model that we worked on. So the other thing that we'll do now is create a post function. So already I can see we have export, asynchronous function known as post. Then when what we want to post or what we want to create there is what we are receiving from the user. So we'll have first thing is you have a response or have the body. Let me call it body is equals to await response.json, what we are receiving now from, I mean the request.json, what we are receiving from the user. That is, we'll be receiving the email and the messages. Then the other thing is chat.create body. Now this is the command that, or the line of code that pushes that what we have received to the database or to MongoDB. Then I can close. So before I finish, I need to do give a response that we're gonna receive. Const next response dot JSON, return JSON. I want us to receive JSON and say message send chats. Then we can have the status code, status 201, since we are writing the database. I think that's all we need to send our the body, or to send our messages to the MongoDB database. So I normally like having this in a try catch. I can have a try catch and then just copy this entire code in try, put it there and have it here, so that in case this does not work, we get the response of our error. So we can get return next response, but I want it to be next response.json. Message which will be the error.message, and then the status code to be 500. Yeah. So we already have our root handler to send chats to MongoDB. So the next thing is create, because I see our time is far much gone, allow me to create now the root handler. I wanted to test this API root using Thunderbolt or Postman, so that we can see whether our API is working, or whether this root handler is working, or this endpoint is working. But allow me, because of time, to first create now the other root handler for fetching the chats. So I'll go back to my chat and create a new folder, which is fetch chats. And in it, I will create a new file known as root.js. So the same way I've done, I will first import chat from model chats. I will also import next response. Yeah. So here, the first thing, because we are fetching, it will be a get function. So we'll say export async function get. We receive no parameters, since we are just getting the data from the database. So the first thing that we'll do here is we'll have a try catch. So in the try, we'll have our response, which is const response equals to await chat.find, and then finding, after you get our data, I want to sort it in accordance to the time it was created. Remember, we are setting the timestamps, so I'll just do sorting by the created time at this in descending order. Then I can then return next response of JSON. Yeah, I will return the response and the status code to 200. In case there is an error, I can just return next response Yeah, I can return next response a JSON file of where the message is the error and the status code at 500. So allow me to check whether this one it's yeah, I have the both root handlers. So I think we have already done this step on where we are creating the API root handler, but let us now see how we can send the charts or we can send our data to our database by linking up now the root handler with our front end. So I'll head over to page.js, and this is where I will create now the functions to send and fetch our data from the database. So I'll come here. I can comment this code which we were logging the messages, and I can just create the first function, which is Mongo submit. First, we want to submit our data, an asynchronous function which we receive. I think I'll just out. Thank you, Copilot. Let me explain this code. So the first thing is that we have the response, which we are hitting the endpoint, which is the API slash chat slash send chats. The method is post since we are submitting to the database. Then we have the headers, which is content type application JSON. Then we also have the body. Now the body is now what we are receiving from the user. And because we remember in our schema, we have the email, and the email is basically used mainly when you have authentication. So I'll just define in the body. Here we are just stringifying the JavaScript to JSON strings. So I'll just define the body. I'll just define an email. I'll just have a custom one. Email, and just say test.com, and we also pass the messages. Yeah, so this is now how the final function we need to submit our charts. So we want the moment a user clicks submit, the moment the user submits a form, it will submit a chart. So I'll come here and create a function known as const, an asynchronous function, charts is equals to async. Then I will, instead of submitting, hitting this function, which is handle submit, I will now change and take this function here. Let me first close this one. A minute. And then have our send charts here. So we have this function being called here after we submit form. So the first thing is it will do, it's now calls the handle submit function. Then the other thing it will do is now do the Mongo, also do the Mongo, called the Mongo submit function. So here we'll pass the event that we are receiving in the form and then pass it here. And I think now we are already done with our function to submit the charts. Let's try it out. So if I'm to go to my chatbot, let me refresh and also go back to my database to confirm that we have no existing data. So in my database, I can go to browse collections rather. So we have this sample data set that was given to us. I can just delete it. That we can have no other existing collection in the database or any other database. So it's empty. So the first thing I will do is I will send a prompt. Hello there. What can you do? As you can see, we are receiving the data in streams. You see, we are not receiving one block in a paragraph. We are receiving after each response is available, we receive it on our end. And then I can say, awesome. So let us see whether we have anything in our database. Let us refresh. Okay, let me see where the challenge is or the issue is. So there's an issue in the send chats, synchronous function, post the request.json. We have a challenge here, small issue. We are receiving the body, which is the request.json file, or is it in our Mongo submit, response send chats, test, body.scriptify. Let me see. I see we have a bug. A minute, I see where the issue is. Mongo operation insert one timed out. So I think there's a challenge on how we have named our we have said MongoDB URI. Then let me see here. Oh, you see the challenge is here. So it's URI. Sorry for that. It's URI, not URL. I think that's the main reason we are receiving that issue or the bug. Let us now try again and see whether it will work. Let me refresh. Hello there. What can you do? Great to hear. So let us come and refresh our database. Wow. So as you can see, we have already received our data and it's in the documents. As you can see, we have the test.com sample email that we added. Then we have the messages array that has, if you get into the messages, it has other objects which have the prompt that we've given and the responses that we've received from the assistant. Hello, how can I assist you today? Now let us create a function to fetch now these object or these messages from the database. So I will head over to my page.js file. We already have this function and now create another function below it, which is const mongo fetch. Mongo fetch is equal to an asynchronous function. Then we will hit the endpoint. So const response. Yeah, we hit the endpoint. Then here I will define the method should be get. So I think it has, let me explain this code. So we have the response that we are fetching from there. We are hitting the endpoint. The method is get. We have the headers, content type, which is application JSON. We have no body because here we are just fetching our data. Then when we get that response, we convert it to JSON and store it into the data variable. Then we can console.log data and see how whether we are fetching our data. So I can come here and call. I want to call this Mongo fetch in a use effect so that each time when we load our application, we have our data with us. So I'll create a use effect. So use effect should be in import use effect. The hook should be here with us from React so that I can use it here. So we have this use effect, which is getting now our data from, okay, we have a small bug, use effect, not a function. It should be use effect. Yeah, it is here. Then we have Mongo fetch. Then we have the dependency array. Yeah, so when we load our application, the use effect will call this by default. It will fetch these, it will call the Mongo fetch, and then we can console log and see whether we have our data. Possibly I can give it a name and say this is data. Let us see whether we are fetching our data. I can come here and inspect. Okay, we have a small issue with our use effect. Let me first call the Mongo fetch. see that we have our data. Let me refresh and see whether we have our data with us. Yeah, so you can see we are receiving our data. So here it's the data that we have stored in our database. So let me, I don't know where the use effect is. Let me just, hopefully it's well, yeah, it's well. Oh, it should be in, yeah, so let me come back and now do the use effect here. Use effect, then call Mongo fetch, then have our dependency array. So here is our use effect, and I believe it's now working. Use E effect. Use E is not defined. So we have use E somewhere. We have a small issue somewhere. Let me refresh. Yeah, I've refreshed. Let me check whether we have that, or the bug is no longer there. And you see we also have our data. So the moment we refresh or we get to the page, we'll always be getting our data. So now that we are getting our data, we want to store this data into a state so that we can log it immediately. When anyone gets it back to the application, they can get their data the same way ChatGPT works. So I can have a use state here. Use state. Because our data is an object and it comes in form of an array, then I can have use state. So charts, we'll get the charts and set charts. So we have our use state. So the moment we fetch our charts, we can store them. Set charts will store the data now into these charts. So once we have our data with us and it is stored in the chart state, we can come back now to our project and now have the chart there. So the first thing is that I will map over, because the charts comes as an object. I will map over the chart object. Then I will have this div. So let me edit something here. So the moment we get our charts, the charts come and we also have the messages as an object inside charts. So the other thing I will do is map over the charts and also map over the messages object. So I'll come here and also map over messages. What I'll do is in charts in C dot messages, I will map over them and then just repeat the process as it is here. As you can see here, I'll have the messages, I will map over them, and then in case the role is the user, it will display user, and in case the role is the AI, it will display AI, then display the content. So let us come back to application, reload, and see whether we'll be getting. As you can see, we are already getting our data with us. So the moment I refresh, the first thing it's doing, it's fetching our data from the database, and then we can have it here. And our app is complete, though not fully complete, because we've not done things like authentication, which would have taken more time. So we can possibly even have another session on learning how to do authentication, and that's where email comes in, because you can have this project with other people out there, and when people are working on such sending their charts, since we're using one database, you need to sort that data in accordance to the email or the authentication of the user. So I believe we already have our chatbot working, and in case I'm to send any other prompt, I can also generate some code. As you can see, it generates some code. So because of time, I could have created another ref. I could have taken the use ref hook and added it there. I don't know whether I still have time, Julia, to add a small ref so that it can auto scroll. So, Julia?
Sorry, you can go ahead. We have a few more minutes.
Okay. So we want to have now that auto scroll feature, or as you go to ChatGPT, as it is generating the prompts, we normally have that auto scroll. So normally we'll use a reference that will reference a specific div so that it can always scroll to view. So I can import here also, use ref, then create const, let me call it bottom ref is equals to use ref. Then I can have a div here. I can have a div where I'll give it the ref as bottom ref, and then now have a use effect that takes now the bottom ref dot current, then scroll to view. I can let me add the dependency array. When we receive a new message, it should scroll to view, and then let me say I want it to be smooth, behavior smooth. I can have it that way. So the moment we go back to our project, we have this use ref that called this bottom this reference or this ref, and then the ref is referring to this div of ours that is just below the. Actually, this should be in the messages that we are receiving. That is a message that we are receiving from the bot. That is the response. So if I'm to come back to my application and refresh. Okay, they are asking for the optional chaining. Yeah, in case current is undefined, so that's why I have to add an optional chaining. We are getting our data. Then if I'm to ask, wow, what can you do? Let me just give it the exact prompt that we had. As you can see, it's scrolling by itself because now we are referencing to that div at the end when it should scroll into view. So I think I'm done with our chatbot. We didn't do a lot of styling, though you can add some styling. You can say in each div where you have the AI, it can give a different background. If I'm to refer to this one, where we have the AI, it can give a different background. Where we have the user, it can give a different background. The images are coming from authentication. If in case we could have done authentication, we could have added images. We could have added more features into it. But I think now I am done. Now we already have our chatbot. And the last thing is to only tell you that in case you go to this link, you'll find a repository that has the steps. That is the first step and the second step that we have done, and also the main branch. So the main branch has only the template, the NextJS template. Then the step one has the step one that we have done. As you've seen, it's just creating an NextJS app and having the UI. Then if you go to branch step two, a branch by name step two, you will see we have created and integrated with MongoDB. So if you go to this link, bit.ly/nextChatAI, you'll find that repository there with 3 branches. As I've mentioned, the main branch, step 1 and step 2. So I think I am done, possibly in case of any questions.
Mark, thank you so much.
Alicia?
It doesn't look like there is any question in the chat. It feels like everything was very clear. Yeah, thank you again so much for joining this session and hosting this session.
Wow, thank you so much too. I'm grateful and I look forward to connect with others. In case anyone has a question, they can reach out to me anytime, and they can also refer to the OpenAI documentation and all the other documentation. Thank you.
Thank you again and see you soon.
Bye-bye.